ever. What's up, wrestling fans? It's the Two Bros Wrestling Show. The Go Live is not tricking me tonight. I am ready to roll. I'm in a different
Well,
location again. We'll see if we can get the frozen Doug tonight.
my fingers are always crossed for Frozen Doug. We all love Frozen Doug. Hopefully, he makes a return some point soon.
Well, he may. We'll see how the mesh works in this part of the house and see what's what tonight.
How are you, Doug? Other than not frozen.
I am present. How about you?
Present and accounted for. Happy to be here. Happy to be anywhere. Happy to be talking wrestling. Happy to have all of those who are watching at home and joining in on us as we talk tonight in our main event coming up in about 5 or 10 minutes. WrestleMania week. The hits, misses, winners, and losers. And we're not just talking match winners and losers. If you watched our preview and if you watched our review of the main event itself, the main attraction itself, you already have that. But Doug, when you talk WrestleMania week, you're really looking at things we haven't talked about: the Hall of Fame, NXT, the behind-the-scenes winners and losers of WrestleMania, and there's even some hits and misses and winners and losers from the companies outside of WWE. So we're gonna pick up on all those little nuances that are the real winners and losers, and not the scripted winners and losers.
It's a whole lot of wrestling we're going to talk about.
It is a whole lot of wrestling. Maybe we should get to it.
Let's get to it.
All
Boom,
right.
opening bell. I just lost my mouse. I think I just broke my mouse. Okay. We may have the opening bell all night. Okay.
There we go. All right. Did you get the opening bell sound effect? You got to get the opening bell sound effect.
Yeah. Wait, do I need to do this again?
Just making sure. Now I'm afraid that the match might actually be over because the bell's rung twice. But no, it is time for the opening bell. And we are going to talk Mania, as we said, Mania week. We're going to start the news, though, before we get to the main event, with some Mania week related. God, Doug, it seems like this is now a Mania tradition, too, is you have your weekly or your annual WrestleMania week layoffs. And that is what leads the news this week.
1 year to the day, right? From what was it, Black Wednesday last year, where like 40-some talents and backstage and support personnel were released from WWE. Nowhere near that number this year, but there's still people were feature endeavored this week, this Wednesday, actually, 1 year to the day.
Yeah, like you said, not nearly the numbers, but still some shocks and surprises in there. Obviously, of those that let go, the most maybe alarming name to some would be the fact that Samoa Joe was let go, especially considering Samoa Joe played such a integral role in WWE during WrestleMania weekend itself. He was on air doing his part as a commentator all weekend long, calling those matches. Joe hasn't been in a ring in more than a year, but recently had told Sports Illustrated that he was eager to return to in-ring combat. And, just for completion here, in addition to Joe, we also saw the end of WWE careers for Billy Kay, Mickie James, Wesley Blake, Tucker, Chelsea Green, Kalisto, Bo Dallas, Mojo Rawley, who was kind of a late addition, not originally mentioned in the first round, but he was also part of those layoffs, and Peyton Royce. Doug, obviously, Samoa Joe, he hasn't wrestled in more than a year. He's amazing on the microphone. He was your commentator of the year when we did our award show, so we know he's great on the mic. I can see a Tony Khan salivating. I think there's gas in the tank. Joe's motivated. There's some dream matchups in AEW. I would be very surprised if, I'm surprised WWE let him walk to the competition because I can't imagine the competition wouldn't pick him up.
Right.
Peyton Royce, I can see with her husband being in AEW. I think maybe even her best friend if she brings Billy Kay along.
I was going to say, if wherever Peyton Royce goes, Billy Kay is going to. I mean, we need the Iconics back together. I don't know why WWE's broke them up to begin with, but.
Well, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. They went nowhere after they were broke up. And they obviously have charisma, and they do have decent in-ring skills as well. I can see them enhancing AEW's rapidly improving women's division. But do you see, other than those three that I'm seeing, do you see any others in that list? Obviously, AEW just can't hire everybody that WWE lets go. But is there anyone else on that list that you can think of that would be particularly attractive to an AEW.
Those are the top three on my list. And, Joe, whether he goes on to have a few more matches or go straight to the commentary table, I really don't care. Whoever picks up Joe is going to have a win on their hands there. And the Iconics, whatever they choose to call themselves going forward, I do think they come as a package, and they will probably be going to AEW since we have Peyton Royce, real life husband, Sean Spears already with the Pinnacle. So. I see them going there. I don't know about anybody else on the list. I mean, they're all talented, hands down. My goodness, it's just a great time to be a wrestling fan. But, there's a lot of talent out there, and I think all these folks are going to land on their feet and aren't really too worried about it. Maybe Mickie James moves to the NWA, does some things there with her real life husband. I don't know.
Chelsea Green had a really great career in Impact. Many of you who don't watch anything other than maybe WWE might have wondered what the big deal was about her. She basically called up to the main roster and broke her arm in her very first appearance on SmackDown. So you never really got to see what she can do. Her real life husband is Matt Cardona, who is in Impact, and she had quite a career in Impact prior to coming to WWE. I can see that as a landing spot for her. But, it's one of those situations, like I said, it's a good time to be a wrestling fan, but all these talent will land somewhere. But AEW just simply doesn't have enough airtime to absorb everybody who's worthy that leaves WWE. A Kalisto, at one point was looking like he might be the next Rey Mysterio. I just don't see where some of these guys can possibly fit into the small 2 hours that AEW currently has. But yeah, Joe's a definite. That was a big shocker that WWE let him walk.
Yeah. I do not get that, especially when he stepped up during, the WrestleMania rain delays. I mean, when has WrestleMania, first of all, ever had a rain delay? But, Joe stepping up and doing his commentary thing there and just I don't know. I just don't understand it. I mean, I was watching Jim Cornette podcast. It was playing on YouTube while I was doing some work around the house today. I'm listening to him talk about Joe and talk about how Joe has been a victim of bad booking for 20 years. This guy should have been, 15, 20 years ago, this guy should have made a main event player somewhere. And he's had his runs in Impact back in the day, and I think his best run is probably in NXT. There's a great program with Kurt Angle back in the Impact days, but Joe should have been a major player long, long ago, and I don't know how they let him go.
ROH may have something to say about that, but I mean, honestly, Joe had an amazing career all the way up to the point that he made it to the main roster, and then he got, as many do, lost in the WWE shuffle. Obviously, he has a future post retirement in a commentary booth, but gosh, I think even with his age, there's still the motivation now to see him against guys we've not seen him against. That Tony at the end of that 90 days is going to be on the phone. I can't imagine he would. Mm-hmm. But while we're talking layoffs, oddly enough, AEW news. AEW star Ivelisse has confirmed that she has been released by AEW. Her claim was that she was let go for speaking up against mistreatment backstage by a coach, and even names this week online, saying that certain talent, in particular Thunder Rosa, had been slandering her backstage and sabotaging her progress in AEW. Doug, this one is unusual to me only because, yes, we are kind of used to what we were talking about here at the top of our show, WWE regularly letting folks go because they accumulate so much talent. As I mentioned, AEW cannot hire everyone, but when was the last time you remember them actually releasing someone? I can't remember anyone.
Let's see, B. Priestley and Jimmy.
Yep.
Oh gosh, Jimmy Havoc.
Yep, because of the speaking out.
Speaking up, I don't remember why B. Priestley was released, but.
So, I mean, it is extremely rare for us to see this happen in AEW. So, for that reason alone, it's kind of notable. More changes, though, in the world of wrestling. Adam Virk is the new voice of Monday Night Raw, if you tuned in this past Monday night. Corey Graves and Byron Saxton have joined him now as the commentary analyst for Virk. Virk replaces Tom Phillips, who did not appear at all Mania weekend, and that left all the commentating duties to Michael Cole, whether they were SmackDown matches or Raw matches, if you noticed that or not during WrestleMania. Virk was formerly a broadcast announcer with ESPN, kind of infamous because he was fired by ESPN for reportedly leaking information about the company. And he's worked most recently for MLB Network. And Doug, I don't know what you thought, but his debut performance on Monday was pretty bad, full of cliches and lack of product knowledge. I think at one point he referred to Sheamus as the Celtic Warrior and had to be corrected by Corey Graves. At one point there's a front face lock and he's calling it a headlock. I understand that Vince likes real life sportscasters making the jump into his world. He thinks it gives them, here's an MLB guy, former ESPN guy. But there's a lot more to, wrestling announcing than just having a good voice. Did you catch the performance? What did you think of it?
I did not catch it. It sounds pretty bad, though. But, I mean, you get somebody who's not familiar with the product and bring them in. There's going to be a learning curve there. The learning curve should not be on live TV, though.
On the flagship show. Yeah.
Yeah. I get it. The guy's not familiar with the product. The guy was brought in for other reasons, like you say. It legitimizes it and everything. Maybe brings a few more eyes to it. It's almost like these celebrity matches that when you bring in those folks, you try and legitimize it. You try and bring in more eyes, but then you have your old marks like us just rolling our eyes when he calls what was it, a front face lock, a headlock. Yeah.
When he calls Sheamus the Celtic Warrior, and I mean Graves, Graves let the face lock headlock thing pass, but he did not. He called him out on that, and he even said, "Hey, there's a learning curve. We can't expect you to get it in the first night." But yes, to your point, if it is your first night in the company, it shouldn't be calling Monday Night Raw. I mean that's being thrown into the deep end and not in a place to succeed. While we're talking announcing news. Though, because of Samoa Joe's departure and then Corey Graves being moved to Raw, the shuffle around and the domino effect of all that means that this past Friday, if you did not catch SmackDown, folks, SmackDown's new color commentator joining Michael Cole at the announce desk is Pat McAfee, who has most recently been involved with NXT, even as an on-air talent and not a broadcaster. But as opposed to Virk on Monday night, because of lack of product knowledge, Pat McAfee, yes, he's an NFL guy, but he loves this world of ours, this wacky world of wrestling. He's a student of the game. He's a natural heel, good talker. And Doug, he made a great announcer on Friday night. I think that he's going to work out great.
I mean, I don't know what else at this point we would expect from McAfee, and all I'm saying is we're this much closer to the McAfee Bad Bunny tag team than I want to see.
Make it happen, Vince. Make it happen.
Right, make it happen.
One more bit of announcing news before I move on to a couple of items, but Mauro Ranallo, a name we might not have heard in a while, a former SmackDown announcer, he's going to be making his return to professional wrestling at Impact's upcoming Rebellion pay-per-view. Ranallo, who's not been involved in the product since he had a mutual parting of the ways with WWE, is going to call the title unification match between Kenny Omega and Rich Swann. And, I mean, that's a good call. The man's passionate and he's excellent on the mic, and that match is going to be fantastic, and it's going to give that big fight feel to bring in an announcer of his caliber. Apparently, though, this is a one-off, so don't fans of his work don't get overly excited. But before I move on to the other news items here, I will say that with all this announcing news and shakeup, it got us thinking it's going to inform our next show. There's a lot to wrestling announcing, and there's a lot more to being a wrestling announcer than just having product knowledge. There's an art to it, and we're going to talk about that during our show next week. So we got you covered on that one. We'll tell you a little bit more about that later. This past week too was the very first night that we had where there was not a Wednesday night war. So since AEW debuted, we have had a head-to-head competition. This normally we don't talk ratings here a lot unless there's just something really peculiar, outstanding to mention. We don't get we never really got bogged down, Doug, in the week-to-week reporting who won this week and what the demos were and all that. But it is very interesting to note that the first week that we did not have head-to-head competition, it definitely a rising tide raised all boats in this situation. NXT on Tuesday saw a huge ratings bump, including the highest rating it's ever seen yet in the key demo here in 2021. It was even better news for AEW not having competition on Wednesday night because they had the traditional Wednesday spot unopposed, and it's the first time AEW has broke 1 million viewers since the very debut episode of AEW. So even though it was kind of fun to pretend we had a wars going on again, like Raw and Nitro, back when we did Raw and Nitro, Doug, I would put in a VHS tape and record one. And then, and I mean, in these days of everybody catching things on demand or whatever, I don't know that the Wednesday Night Wars had that same kind of immediacy, like, really, we're having to choose or make extra effort. Most hardcore fans probably watched both. And by the fact they're not opposed, it just means I don't go to bed at 12:30 on or 1 o'clock on a Wednesday night now. And everybody has higher ratings. So I really think that this is a good thing by spreading it out.
Absolutely. I don't think we needed a Wednesday night war at all, but we had one for a while, regardless of what anybody says. But now that it's spread out, it's a win for everybody. Again, it's a great time to be a wrestling fan.
Great time to be a wrestling fan. Last bit of news, and this one's not very surprising, but reports came out this week that 4 of Mania's matches had changes to their finishes the weekend of the event. Not unusual for WWE to have last-minute changes, but even on a show as big as Wrestlemania, apparently some of these were coming even the day of. Meltzer's one of those that's reporting that this is the case, and if the rumors are true, then the Fiend-Orton match was one that for sure was changed. Not that I'm sure that either way, I don't think was going to save it if that finish was going to be something like that. I don't think the winner really mattered so much. But the other that was kind of interesting that was supposedly changed last minute was Edge was originally booked to go over Reigns and Bryan, which of course did not happen, which changes the dynamics of everything really on SmackDown moving forward. But yeah, supposedly last minute changes, and that is the opening bell.
All right.
Are we ready to talk main event?
Boom, main event. Man, there's been so much wrestling over the past 2 weeks, really, because I was thinking about this. Traditionally, that road to WrestleMania week, we've got our Raw, we've got our SmackDown. Now we've got our Raw, our NXT, we've got our SmackDown. We have 2 nights of WrestleMania. We have a Raw after it, which traditionally has ended the WrestleMania week, but we really can't call that the ending show now, because we have way down there at the other end of the work week, we have a Friday night SmackDown, and in between there on Tuesday, we've got NXT. So there's, a lot stretching out through there. And in between that, like you said, we've got the competition doing their thing too. Riding high on the WrestleMania wave.
That's not even mentioning the Hall of Fame, which this year was not the class of 2021. It was the class of 2020, and then a separate show for the class of 2021. So we thought it would be good for our main event topic, Doug. We're just going to quick hit some of these. Some of them we can talk about, some of them we can quick hit, but there was a lot to talk about that we just literally did not have the time to talk about when we're only talking about previewing the show and then talking about match quality and winners and losers. But there's a lot to take in when the center of the wrestling universe collides that week. I kind of did mine a little chronologically here, so if you want, I can start with the Hall of Fame. I got a couple of hits and misses from that.
There you go for it, man, because there's a lot of having this much wrestling, and there's a lot of wrestling I'm still missing and still really just picking up, in like short little bites on like YouTube, like wrap up shows, so.
Well, if you haven't seen the Hall of Fame, I will say that Titus O'Neil is a definite hit. They give the Warrior Award out, and many times that, even though it has gone to folks who have done some amazing things in their communities, with organizations, inspirational things, a lot of these folks really have very tangible very loosely tangible ties to wrestling itself. But Titus O'Neil is a member of the WWE family. And honestly, one of the more heartfelt things I saw all week was the speech he gave in acceptance. And it was a total hit for me and a total validation as to why he is the perfect ambassador for WWE, why he's someone who's not just not just talking the talk, he's walking it. The amount that man does in the name of children especially was inspiring. And whereas a lot of times the Hall of Fame speeches can be rambling remembrances of guys who've been hit in the head too many times, Titus O'Neil gave a speech that would make him think that he could earn money as a motivational speaker. By the end of it, there wasn't a dry eye in the house had there been people in the house.
I like that. That's a very appropriate description of the Hall of Fame.
Well, okay, that actually leads into a miss. If you don't mind, I'll go into a miss about the Hall of Fame.
Brother. You go, brother.
Pre-production, right? So I actually thought that because the fact that the Hall of Fame does tend to stretch on to the point that they in previous years started moving it away from WrestleMania the night before WrestleMania because it was keeping all the talent up too late. Because these guys do tend to sometimes ramble on. I thought, pre-production, you're going to make it a better show. It'll be crisper, more watchable. Sometimes in the live setting with fans there, fans can make it about themselves, and they could be a little rude to the talent who are just trying to get over, how they feel about being inducted and things. And so, yeah, I was kind of disappointed that, in fact, the pre-production sort of took a little bit of the life out of it. And instead, it made me wondering what speeches were hitting the floor, and then some of the things that were there. And I'm sure this was also because they weren't actually playing to fans. They were just talking to teleprompters, I guess. Right. But some of it seemed overly rehearsed. The Bellas, who I think are totally worthy of being acknowledged, had a cutesy speech that just had the kind of cringy back and forth banter that you expect on like an Oscars telecast from presenters or something. It didn't have the same heartfeltness as it does when it's live and when it's in front of a crowd. So that ended up being a miss for me. Did you have any hits or misses from the Hall of Fame?
I have not seen the Hall of Fame, so I have no hits, no misses.
I'll give you one more hit then before we.
All right, man. You keep them going.
This was a quick one. Matilda's great-granddaughter. Come on. How could you not pop for Matilda's great-granddaughter? Davey Boy Smith Jr. comes out there, accepts on behalf of his father, comes out with what I thought was just a makeshift, hey, this looks like a British bulldog like Dad used to have in the day. Turns out, no, they kept it in the family. It's Matilda's great-granddaughter. That was awesome. Exactly. It was an awe moment. NXT TakeOver, Doug. I'll let you have some hits and misses for that because I got plenty. I'm ready to move.
I haven't seen TakeOver either, brother. I'm a busy man, and there's too much wrestling going on. This is what happens when you're working 3 homes, one job.
All right, let me talk to you. What do you say?
All right, preach to me. Preach it to me.
Winner, MSK. Not only did they win the NXT tag titles, which is obviously, a pre-scripted thing. So again, we didn't get to talk about the reviews of our NXT watching experience since some of us didn't have it yet.
Right.
But I mean, on the heels of just winning the Dusty Cup, then they get elevated to win this triple threat when I thought that they would maybe chase it for a while. This prepositions them as a focus of NXT, which is pretty impressive when you consider they just got here. I have preached, I think even on this show, that if you're not watching Impact, the Radicals were one of my favorite tag teams. Obviously, they're rebranded, but this shows me that WWE, or at least the folks at NXT, realize that what they have is something special, and so they are definitely a winner, not just because they were scripted to be a winner, but because the guys behind the scenes recognize this team as a winner. A miss for me was Jordan Devlin versus Santo Escobar. One of the matches I was actually looking most forward to from TakeOver. It was a ladder match. It was very good, and I very much hesitate to say that a match that was very good is a miss. But honestly, I had the bar has been raised so high for takeovers and ladder matches in general, and these two are so talented. What I expected them, the level I expected them to get to, they never actually got to. So a good performance when a show-stealing performance is what I was looking for, was a bit of a disappointment. A winner, Karrion Kross, great heel character, and I'm calling him a winner not just because he walked out with the strap attached to him, but I call him a winner because here's a man who had won the belt many months ago and injured himself in that win and was immediately taken off TV, having to relinquish the title. Doug, as you know, and Finn Balor is a great example. The man who he beat is a great example. You win the Universal title, you're the first Universal Champion, you get injured in the match. Finn never made it back to that spot, ever, not even close to the main event.
He had to drop it the next night, very much like Karrion Kross, but yeah.
And when he came back to what?
But it's a very different world. It's a third brand. I don't like thinking of it as developmental because NXT is so much more than that. I think it's a legitimate third brand. There's Raw, there's SmackDown, there's NXT. NXT happens to be tied very closely to the Performance Center, though. But I think it's a legitimate third brand and a legitimate third option for fans. And it's a different world. Finn never got back to that, but Finn was on the main roster then. But Karrion Kross is down there in NXT, and I think Triple H and the powers that be down there recognize the talent that is there, and aren't going to penalize somebody. Not necessarily that Finn Balor was penalized on the main roster, but you lose your spot real quick on Raw or SmackDown.
Amen. That's exactly it. And I think it goes to show the talent in NXT that, hey, I don't have to try to work hurt or pretend nothing's wrong. That if I'm over and they believe in me, I will come back and be at a similar level as to when I left. Yes. And that makes Kross a big winner here. A loser that I had was Santos Escobar. I know I mentioned him earlier. I hate to call out someone I admire as much as I like Escobar as a double loser, but originally I had Kushida in this spot because Kushida had one of the best matches of the week with Pete Dunne and at TakeOver. However, he lost, and Kushida always loses, which made me think, okay, Kushida is that guy who helps get the other guys over, but you're the gatekeeper. You're the guy we trust, but we're never going to give you anything significant. Then they swerved me with NXT this past Tuesday night. Santos Escobar, who came off that slightly disappointing ladder match, retained the belt only to lose it, surprisingly, to Kushida in his very first title defense on the very first NXT on Tuesday nights. So that's a long way of going around going, good for Kushida for finally, getting something of significance and looking like he has something behind him. But Escobar had a bit of a tough week booking-wise.
If only Kushida could just freshen up that gimmick just a little bit.
Dude, he's Back to the Future, and Back to the Future is already 40 years past. So
just freshen up just a smidge,
Another big winner of the week from the NXT brand, Doug, was Bronson Reed. It's one thing to have a victory on TakeOver, but you win that gauntlet. Sure, somebody's going to win the gauntlet, but there's a lot of guys involved. It's hard to stand out. It did show some faith in him. The next night, though, he lost, and I still call him a winner because Johnny Wrestling made him look like $1 million. So between winning the gauntlet over L.A. Reid and other guys that I thought were maybe more positioned as the hot new thing to take that spot, Bronson Reed takes that spot, doesn't get the win against Johnny Gargano, but looks like, okay, if you want a good example of how you can be a winner even though you lose, you come out of that match going, Bronson Reed's going to be somebody. And a lot of that's, of course, because Johnny Wrestling is just that good. But Bronson Reed held up his end and does not wrestle like a big man at all, and definitely was a winner. The loser, Doug, this was one that maybe you and after this one, I'm going to give you a shot because I think I might be out of my NXT ones now. But Mike Tyson. So this is not WrestleMania week.
Dynamite. I can talk about this.
That's why I thought this one you could talk about because the baddest man on the planet. I mean, it's counter programming. It's Mania week. It's the first night you're not unopposed to, or why? Actually, I guess he first showed up the week before the last time that he was going against TakeOver. So in that way, it was counter programming. But I mean, my goodness, Mike Tyson was one of the best celebrities to ever appear in wrestling back in the Attitude Era. And not that he did a bad job with AEW, and I understand why AEW would do it. However, who would have ever guessed that Mania week, that instead of talking Mike Tyson, the celebrity everyone will be talking about was not the baddest man on the planet, but instead Bad Bunny. I mean, in that way, when you get scooped by a rapper with named after a rabbit, it's like.
But all credit where credit is due here, man. Bad Bunny is hip with the kids. He's drawing more eyes to that, and my God, he's great in the ring. From a celebrity standpoint, he is excellent in the ring. I mean, he's no Pat McAfee, but he could be, and I want that McAfee Bad Bunny celebrity tag team.
I just thought it was like kind of comical that, okay, you got Mike Tyson, legit tough guy, and everyone's talking Bad Bunny. I would think that for the money that AEW probably dished out for that, they probably had to be slightly disappointed that they were scooped in the mainstream press by something they probably didn't see coming, to be quite honest. I don't think any of us saw Bad Bunny coming the way he did.
I got to go. I'll be back.
All right. Well, I will talk a few more winners and losers then on NXT related things from the big show. So a winner from this past week of WrestleMania was Walter. And if for those of you who did see NXT TakeOver, you know that Walter beat, won in his match and defended his UK championship against Tommaso Ciampa. And that wasn't the whole of his week, though, because if for those of you, and I'm afraid it's maybe relatively few that actually watch NXT UK, but the very week of Mania, the very night after a takeover, after having such a great contest against Tommaso Ciampa, he also then goes on to have a great title defense against Rampage Brown. To me, right now, Walter may be the best wrestler in the world. I do believe at the very least he's perhaps the most believable wrestler in the world. I think despite all the hype on some of the other matches of WrestleMania week and the matches that I would probably say were better just because they were on Mania or had more story behind them, if you want to just talk pure work rate, I think that Ciampa and Walter had the best match of the entire WrestleMania week. So that's a big thing right there. So winner, Walter. Or Walter, I guess, using the Austrian pronunciation. A loser of the week for WrestleMania week. And this one that pains me to even talk about because we like to say he's friend of the show, but Keith Lee. Keith Lee had to sit and watch his former indie peers, guys like Matt Riddle, having meaningful Mania matches, guys that are still on NXT, having, guys like Walter, who we're just talking about, stealing the show. And then you have Keith Lee, who at one point, in time was, standing in a Royal Rumble match face to face with Roman Reigns with 30,000 people popping huge. And then, he later in that year pops up on Raw, beats Randy Orton. I mean, just from the beginning, big things were happening for Keith Lee. And then around February or March of this year, he disappeared completely. And speaking of disappearing completely, there he's back.
Sorry, I'm apparently never not working. So, all right.
Yeah, this is one you can talk about here. I'm talking about one of the losers from WrestleMania week being Keith Lee. He sat there and he watched others that indie peers of his have meaningful Mania matches. Keith Lee was absent from WrestleMania season. His sole role during WrestleMania was as a member of a watch-along on YouTube for WWE. You talk about a disappointment. I don't know how you can look at it any other way.
I don't understand how the powers that be, because we've heard that WrestleMania, WWE is really playing to an audience of one. There's only one person that is really making every single decision there is, and you impress him or you don't. But whatever is going on there, I don't understand the hot and cold that they run, the start-stop pushes and all that, and how you can look at Keith Lee and go, yeah, no, or just how you can look at Samoa Joe and go, yeah, let's get rid of him. I mean, I
Keith
don't
Lee,
understand that. You
Keith
know,
Lee's
I'm terrified of the Cesaro push that's going on right now because it could be over. Yeah, it could be over now.
yeah,
Yeah, I
he
don't
might have
know.
already been released while we're on air.
Who knows? I mean, really?
Keith Lee should be at the top of any roster that he's a member of, and he's doing
Indeed.
watch along, and he's not hurt. I mean, from my understanding, there's not really an injury or anything. It's just literally, like you alluded to, Vince McMahon reportedly not seeing what everyone else sees, and then them losing some faith in him during the middle of his push. And who knows if he'll ever regain that momentum? So many don't.
Yeah, and Dave Poole has a great point here. Aleister Black, same deal. Of course, reports are now coming out that last year it was either going to be Black or Drew McIntyre that took out Brock Lesnar at the last minute. Vince decided that Drew was more marketable. So where's Aleister Black been since then?
Yeah, nowhere, and that might be punishment for his wife. Who knows? It can sometimes get really, really petty. Scott Johnson had a good point too, and I just now saw his comment. So I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't see it. I missed it when Scott was gone. But yes, Tyson may not have had the same impact that Bad Bunny had, but don't tell that to Dax Hardwood, who took what looked like an incredibly vicious Tyson punch to the jaw that hurt me watching at home.
I'm not sure. I mean, if you've read Jericho's books, he talks about how Tyson tells him not to move, because if you move, I will hit you. But as long as you don't move, it's going to look great. And Jericho says, sure enough, he just stands there and does his thing. Tyson comes through, just grazes him, enough for it to look great on camera, and then he goes down back in the day. And I'm wondering if the same thing happened just then, or if dude legit got clocked. I'm not sure.
Either way, that I will give Tyson credit. It might not have made the Bad Bunny headlines, but that punch was stiff.
Yeah.
Another winner, Doug, that I had from the week, and that is that of women's wrestling. We saw a complete changing of the guard in WWE for women's wrestling. You start with NXT TakeOver, and Raquel Gonzalez, ascends to that championship. Bianca Belair, of course, has the match that she has in the main event with Sasha Banks, ascending to that championship, and then Rhea Ripley does the same. They're all three newer talents ascending to the top of their respective divisions, and then the three of them together on this past week's NXT, which you may not have seen yet, but I mean, we got Raquel in the ring, and then surprisingly, during her victory speech, here comes Rhea Ripley from the main roster, and you think that they're going to go face to face to challenge. They end up in a hug, and then to complete the scenario, you get the EST's music hits, and you realize what's happening. And here are these three women in the ring, and they got this photo of them back, a couple of years ago behind the stage at WrestleMania, and here they all three are holding up their championships. And that was one of my favorite visuals, honestly, from the entire week of WrestleMania. Those three women showing that this might be the next evolution, visually speaking, of the women's evolution, and that this is the next guard in the line of Sasha. Not that those women are stepping aside, but there's definitely some new kids in town.
Yeah, I've seen the visual, and I think it's very cool, and it's a callback to our original four horsewomen with Bailey and Sasha and Charlotte and Becky Lynch, and now we have these three. I don't know if they ever had something similar to call themselves when they were coming up through the ranks, but I think it is great. And you're right, it is an evolution, and the next evolution in the women's revolution.
Absolutely. Loser of the week, Tom Phillips. I don't know. I mean, yes, he was not amongst those that were released, not like some of the talent or other commentators like Samoa Joe, who also / talent. But Tom Phillips, there's really some question as to why he missed Mania. And at least Joe got to participate in Mania, but Tom Phillips was off Mania altogether. There's some indication it might have been COVID related, but regardless, there's certainly you go from hyping WrestleMania to not being on WrestleMania to being taken off the main flagship show in all of professional wrestling, Monday Night Raw. And I guess his new role is he is the on-air voice for 205 Live. I mean, you talk about your star falling. No offense to 205 Live, which under the radar can oftentimes have some of the best matches you'll see on TV every week. It's not a show that people watch, and Raw is the show that if anyone catches one show in the WWE universe, it's going to be Raw. That is definitely someone whose star has completely fallen.
So full disclosure, I didn't realize 205 Live was still a thing.
Which is my point exactly, right?
Huh.
And that, yeah, he has some behind the scenes roles, but I'm sure that there's more of a story there. We'll follow. There's got to be more behind why there's a last minute change of that significance and that severity, and then the man not just be let go outright. Hopefully that comes to light. I never, to be honest, was a huge fan of his work. I thought he was a little vanilla. He didn't really stand out to me one way or the other. But obviously, right before Mania seems an odd time to make such a drastic change. So there might be something more to that one. But definitely, Tom Phillips was not having a great Mania week.
Yeah.
Winner, Bobby Lashley. Doug, his win opening Mania is more than just him keeping that belt, and that's why I'm putting him here as more of a winner, not just a scripted winner. But at a time when everyone expected that Drew was going to get his big victory in front of fans, that was denied him last year. Lashley's win to me indicates that behind the scenes they are building him for something else. And I don't think it's a Drew rematch. Do you think maybe it's a powerhouse match against like a Lesnar or something down the road? Do you think that this means that there's a bigger plan for Lashley?
So, since Lashley entered the WWE or returned to the WWE, he always wanted, and I think there was talk, multiple times of him getting that match with Lesnar. These are both wrestling guys who went away to MMA careers. I think Lesnar having the larger and more popular MMA career through the UFC, but Lashley, an MMA career himself. And I think that's something that writes itself right then and there. I'm not sure how that works out, or if they throw a bunch of money at Brock, but that's something I would sure love to see.
It does make you wonder by the fact that match was moved first and then he goes over that maybe, I thought he was a transition champion, that they used the Miz storyline as a way to get the belt onto Lashley for Lashley to then lose it to Drew. And that didn't happen. So the kudos to Lashley, who's a man who we both agree here on the Two Bros Show is deserving this spot, but definitely a big winner out of all this, which is opposed to a loser of WrestleMania weekend, and that was the pirate ship. No one jumped.
I know, right?
Supposedly, there were from folks in attendance. They said that folks that were close enough saw there were crash pads there. So I'm guessing that maybe it was at one point planned that somebody was going to be jumping off that pirate ship. I imagine that the adverse weather conditions in the Tampa Bay area may have had them rethink some things.
Yeah. Remember back in the day when WrestleMania and main event of WrestleMania could be planned a year ahead of time, and WWE had long-term storytelling and booking plans, and not shaking things up hours before or even during matches at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I remember that.
Sure, the weather plays a role, but it's more likely at the last minute somebody said, what, no, don't do that, do this instead. Defeat them with a headlock or the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, which is the surprise roll up. Do that instead.
Well, actually, Doug, your mention there of the weather does remind me of it leads nicely into my next winner of WrestleMania weekend, and that is God. Because it took God 15 years to avenge his loss to Vince McMahon. But God once lost to Vince McMahon on pay-per-view, and 15 years later, God gets the last laugh on Vince McMahon by getting his receipt, having the first weather delay in the history of WrestleMania. So kudos for God for having a long memory and not forgetting what Vince had done to him.
So now I'm wondering what the rubber match looks like.
If Shawn Michaels is involved again, it'll probably still be good.
I don't know if you talked about this, but I do want to go back to that first night of WrestleMania and talk about this. It's both a win and a loss, because because of that weather delay, we got to see a lot of talent go unscripted. They didn't have, and we got to see why some talent should be able to get out there and go unscripted. And we also got to see why some talent definitely need to be told, say this verbatim. I ain't naming any names, but go back and watch. You'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm calling that a hit and a miss because of God.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I hadn't talked about it, but you are 100% correct. It reminded me of old school wrestling. These men and women were made to think on their feet without a script because they're having to fill time. And it felt so old school that I actually didn't mind the delay. It was making our nights longer, and we already thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be so much wrestling we're going to have to recap and keep up with. And we'd already watched the pre-show, but I actually really much enjoyed watching them scramble with ponchos and stuff on to fill that time. It was fun.
Yes, it was fun. We got some great, just off the cuff promos, and some other people got mics shoved in their face and kind of clumsily rambled through, and grunted at the camera about their opponents for the night. So,
well, I'm giving a big hit and a winner awards to main events. Each of the four main events, TakeOver Night 1, TakeOver Night 2, and then WrestleMania Saturday and WrestleMania Sunday, all delivered. Some of them spectacularly show as the best matches on their respective cards. The odds of going 4 for 4, Doug, in wrestling are kind of long. There's almost always a main event that will kind of let you down. I mean, when you're talking 4 main events, you might be lucky if 2 of them meet the highest expectations that are placed on main events. But kudos to everyone involved that the main events all felt like main events.
So, everybody in these main events was, our top tier talent. They're not there. They're not in their spots because they, have a certain look or sell the most merch or whatever. All across, they're all top tier talents. I'm sure that everybody had quite a bit to do with putting these matches together. And every main event, that I saw anyway, delivered absolutely.
Yeah, you won't be disappointed when you pick up the others, which I know you'll go back and do.
Eventually.
Eventually. A loser, Doug, though, for me from WrestleMania week is the Thunderdome. And I say that just because, last month you and I sat here on the Two Bros show and came to a consensus that to us the best method of right now featuring pandemic era wrestling without, actual crowds of any significance was the Thunderdome concept. And I still think that we're right, that it is. However, when you went from the excitement of WrestleMania and 25,000 and some, I think is the final number, and then on Monday night, you go to the Thunderdome, as good as that normally is, it really shows and highlights what has been totally missing from all of our wrestling shows over the last year. It just, a lot of times that Raw after WrestleMania has that same crowd that's still in town, the international crowd that kind of goes into business for themselves, and they're raucous and they're to the last night of partying, and it's just historically, loud, great. And this one was just raw. I mean, for better or worse,
very controlled.
Yes.
It's a very controlled environment again. You got to pipe in the cheers and the boos for the people who get the cheers or who are supposed to get the cheers. We're supposed to get the boos. WWE has gotten so much better, and their production staff has gotten so much better of making that more or feel more organic, but still, after coming off of WrestleMania where you did have live audience,
it was like falling off the cliff, dude. I mean, it really felt like that. I'm like, oh man, they really. That taste of the crowd back, it just highlighted like, wow, that is what we've missed. To that point, my next winner is Tamina, an example of winning while losing. There's no way in the world that Tamina would have had a match at the Thunderdome and got over. That live crowd, that organic, like, hey, you realize this lady's been here for 10 plus years. You've never given her a shot. You do nothing that make us want to like her, but we like her because we reckon it was that Kofi act-like moment of like, listen, here's someone you count on and you never do anything with. And the crowd just got behind her in a way that could never happen in a pre-produced manner. And even though she lost, And even though they'll likely not do a whole lot with her afterwards, Tamina has to feel like a winner for the fact that the crowd showed that they cared.
Absolutely.
Loser Doug, Randy Orton. Yes, here's an example of the opposite of a man who is a loser even though he won. No one got over in that mess of a match with The Fiend.
Right.
The Fiend character is pretty well ruined at this point. Alexa might, fare better, the best in all of this if they do spin her off into some sort of separate storyline that gets her back in the ring. But Randy gained literally nothing in being the victor in this. He gained nothing by being associated with this true dud of a match. And to top it all off, apparently he paid $20,000 of his own money for his family to witness this 7 minutes of crap. That's really losing if you've spent $20,000 of your own money on a day you should be getting paid, and that's what you paid your family to witness.
They should at least give him the box-like structure.
Box-like structure, I know, right?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I was so disappointed by this whole Fiend thing. I thought the Fiend was getting rehabbed. I love the regeneration. I mean, it was a little cheesy, but I was like, okay, at least we don't have crispy fried Fiend. We have the cool looking Fiend again. And the Fiend, man, I don't know. They had something great. They had something special. That's gone. Randy Orton, Randy's just rolling through. It sucks that he spent $20 grand.
20 grand. Apparently, because of COVID protocols, they didn't have the same amount of comp tickets and family, being able to be backstage. So in order to get him in the building, he apparently paid $20,000, which, is overpaying by $20,000.
Yeah, exactly.
For that match. For that match.
For that match, absolutely. For the main event of either night, no. But for that match, yeah.
Got a couple more for you, Doug. Winners. I hate to say that you're already a winner if you're a billionaire, but Tony Khan and Vince McMahon, winners. Both signed on to the Broken Skull Ranch interview with Stone Cold interviewing Chris Jericho, and it paid off for both of them, really. Tony got a rub from WrestleMania week by having one of his top stars, recognizable stars, a star that all WWE fans would recognize on WWE programming, talking about Tony Khan, AEW, Hangman Page, the Young Buck. I mean, all this stuff. It's a little surreal to think that actually was allowed to happen, but Tony got a lot out of that by agreeing to it. Vince, of course, he gets somebody from the other company, somebody who people presume have some heat with the company, coming back and doing all this exclusively on Peacock, the new streaming service we want you to sign up for. It was a great interview. It was fantastic. Both men were pretty honest. They didn't seem to have anything off the table. Jericho afterwards seemed to say all the right things about, no, I was able to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about. And that's because Vince McMahon and Tony Khan decided it was in their mutual best interest to do so. We all win by having an exhilarating 2-hour conversation between two legends to watch. And they both win because they both got something out of it and really didn't risk a whole lot in order to do so.
So, I mean, it's definitely a win-win. I mean, it was definitely what was best for business for both Tony Khan and Vince McMahon because, it brings more eyes to Peacock. And honestly, besides my insane schedule right now, something that's kept me away from catching up with NXT and watching the complete version of that Broken Skull sessions is the fact that it is on Peacock. And I think we've covered this before. Peacock is not on any Amazon device. There are no Fire Sticks or cubes, and I have Fire Sticks and cubes throughout this house, so I can't download a Peacock app. I could go through the motions of hooking up a my laptop to one of the larger screens here, but that's not really an act of Congress, but it's not all that feasible right now because I'm in the process of a move anyway. So there's no convenient way for me to watch Peacock other than on this thing, which isn't feasible right now. I don't want to watch WrestleMania or an NXT TakeOver on my phone, so get on devices.
hard to get the big match feel when you're watching on a tiny device, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Doug and I didn't have that on my list at all, but I'm glad you mentioned it because there was a lot of complaints. You like to think that even we did our show about it, and there's been a lot of news about it, but honestly, most folks just get surface knowledge, and so you just tune in for WrestleMania, and they're like, "What the heck? You can't rewind? I'm an hour into this. You can't start from the beginning." Things that people just didn't know, even though they've been warned. So not a lot of Peacock love out there. So that's definitely kind of a big miss for this weekend. On the Broken Skull Ranch, I will say that if there's any losers in that scenario, though, and you'll see this, Doug, when you get a chance to watch it, but I'm going to say Impact and ROH didn't come out so great in this, and I will explain. So during the podcast, Jericho mentioned AEW as the first to really challenge WWE as an alternative, and obviously that completely overlooks the history of TNA and their failed attempt to do so back in the day. I know it's not the same level as far as the money that was behind it, but it's easy to look back at the failure and forget that at one point they had a primetime slot on the very network that Raw had just left. So it's not like it was some obscure network they were on. They had signed away Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, Kurt Angle. They had homegrown talent like Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Daniel Kazarian. I mean, they even went head-to-head on Monday nights with them. For a small period of time. So AEW being the first to challenge WWE isn't historically accurate, and you think Jericho would maybe not make that mistake since his organization now is in a alliance which has been extremely one-sided in the fact that you have this match coming up with a unification that never even gets mentioned on Dynamite, which really gives away how that one's going to end. But Impact really did not come out well in that podcast exchange between Jericho and Stone Cold. ROH, less so. It wasn't as bad for them, but at one point Jericho does talk about the fact that there was no national exposure, at least in this country, for guys like the Young Bucks and Hangman Page and Cody, and all those guys had big runs at ROH. I know they don't have a cable clearance, but they are nationally syndicated on Sinclair stations, so there is national coverage that people would have of those things. One quick win for the podcast too for the Broken Skull Ranch is Blanton's. Kudos to the Texas Rattlesnake for having great taste in Kentucky bourbon, because I saw the bottle there, Stone Cold. I know what you're drinking. And Doug, I only have one more loser of the week.
Who is it? What is it? What's going on? Where's your loser?
Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin.
Yes.
So it's one thing to say that the Hurt Business was broke up too soon. We all know that is a total fact. It was. I still thought there was a chance maybe they get back together. They turn that into an angle. Then this Raw after WrestleMania comes about, and Alexander and Benjamin are jobbed out to the returning Viking Raiders. And then by the end, you got two of the former Retribution guys, the big guys in Retribution, doing the Hurt Business's business, which makes me think that they're probably the new members of the Hurt Business. So it seems to me like Cedric and Shelton just got replaced. Tough luck, man, for good guys.
Man, there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense to me, and I got to put this in that hat too. I mean, the Hurt Business was probably the greatest thing going on Raw, and then they break them up. Lashley, I presume Lashley, it went along with Lashley's loss here. Lashley's going to lose at WrestleMania. Lashley keeps the belt at WrestleMania, and I think, like you said earlier, we're going on to something bigger with Lashley with this. But then the stable sort of loosely reforms, or maybe not. Maybe we find out next week that Retribution's just gone into business for themselves and is chasing down bounties or something ridiculous like that. I don't know, man. I don't know where it all goes, but
either way, Cedric and Shelton were lost in that shuffle. They went nowhere.
I mean, the big guys in Retribution, are both great big men. They're both great performers. So good for them, but it's at the cost of Benjamin and Cedric. So
somebody wins, somebody loses. And Doug, that is the winners and losers I have. You have anything to add to that list? I know you didn't get to see a bunch of everything.
Not really. I think you have once again, my brother, done an excellent job in covering us.
That's why I'm here.
Glad
Big
one of us
finish,
is
man.
dedicated to the show full time.
Let's go big finish. What do you say?
Let's do a big finish. You know, it is WrestleMania. Well, we're coming off of WrestleMania week. It's almost like week 2 WrestleMania because it really is a 2-week event. You know, we have the lead up to it, and then we have the follow up to it, which rolls really through through Friday Night SmackDown. So we do our match of the week, our performers of the week, our botch of the week. I've still got to go back to. I've been chewing on this for a while, thinking about this is a big WrestleMania coverage show. Even though we did our hot take reactions right after night 2 last Sunday, but I've been torn. But I'm going match of the week or match of WrestleMania, going to Belair and Banks. Man, those girls, historic match. I just got to give it to them. For that match.
I'm glad you did because that I definitely think that is my match of the week. If I'm being completely honest, if I go just on work rate, I think the best thing I saw all week was Ciampa versus Walter. And I mentioned it, I think, while you had to step away. I honestly think Walter might be the most believable wrestler in the world right now. He's held that title for going on 2 years, which is unheard of in modern wrestling, particularly WWE. And he had a couple of impressive performances. I think he and Ciampa actually had the match of the week, but it was an undercard match on NXT. Once you take the great work involved, the history involved, and then you put it on that platform of WrestleMania, the ladies stole the show. Bianca and Sasha, kudos. Can't say enough good things. Do you have a performer of the week, Doug?
Performer of the week, man, I this is a tough one because I still got to go to the girls on this one, man. The ladies, I think, Bianca Belair is golden. We need to strap a rocket to her and just send her on. And again, I'm going on the WrestleMania performance. Didn't see the follow up for Raw, but yeah, I want to see this too.
But you don't get hard hitting. That's why I'm saying Walter's the best wrestler in the world right now. Like I heard like Bubba Ray Dudley on a show the other day saying that a chop is just a chop. Everyone does a chop. Walter does a chop, and you think someone's died. I mean, he's that believable, and him and Cross would be fantastic in the ring. Doug, you said you didn't see Raw follow up, so my performance of the week is also with the ladies, and it is a Raw follow up. Charlotte Flair. I would have had her listed as one of my losers of Mania week because she was absent from Mania. She was scheduled for a big angle that fell through because of Lacey's pregnancy. She was, scheduled for a match against Asuka for the title, which fell through because of COVID protocols. Her husband gets fired. She was definitely a loser in WrestleMania week. She got it back on the night after WrestleMania. She comes out on Raw and gives the best promo of her entire career. The DNA is strong in this one. That was something that Daddy would be proud of. It was the serious Flair that had just enough realism in it that drew you in. I mean, she talked about the fact that Lacey had to go get pregnant and Asuka had lesser competition, and the behind the scenes rumors about her that have been out there that some of the younger girls say she takes opportunities, and she addressed that by saying, I'm not the one taking your opportunities. I'm the one you go through if you want an opportunity. I give the opportunities around here. It was perfection and immediately elevated her back into that main event scene with her inserted herself in the Asuka Ripley business that what happened on Raw in a match later on that night. You talk about a way to try to salvage what has been a very forgettable couple of months. It reminded everyone who maybe had forgotten just because she was absent that she's still top of the food chain regardless. I don't know what to say about that, David Poole.
I haven't seen Raw, so I'm not going to comment, but I just wanted to throw it out there for the universe, man.
Doug, do you have a botch of the week to end it on?
Man, I will rarely do this, but I am not a fan of the way the Bucks have come around to the super elite or whatever they're calling the whatever the Good Brothers, Kenny Omega, Young Bucks, stable is. I love the match. I love how they do all their good guy moves, but just do them obnoxious enough to get really a throwback to me to like the Generation Me kids from like way back in the day where they're like, oh God, these guys. I love the heel work, but just what it's taken us to get there. I'm not a fan of that. And I love the complex storyline too. The will they, won't they, but it just went a little too long. And again, follow up is key, and I've got faith in the long term booking of AEW a lot more than I do having anything long term that WWE even teases. But I just wasn't a fan of how long it took us to get here and how kind of awkward and almost clumsy it was to get us here.
Dude, I'm glad you brought it up because to me, when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I like where this is going. I like that this historic faction is coming together, but you did this 2 months ago and then you backtracked on it. And why did you do that if you were just going to end it back up there to begin with? Like, why did the Bucks join back with the Elite only to break away from them and act like, no, we don't want anything to do with Don Callis, just to come back into the fold? I'm like, that's a step that didn't need to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the storytelling is Don has broken them down to and rebuilt them to the Bucks that they once were. It just took a little bit longer.
Well, Doug, my botch of the week, and I'm afraid to do this because I don't want your checks from Tony Khan to stop coming, but it's also against AEW. But one of the best things I saw in non-WWE over WrestleMania week and a half was Impact this past week. There was a fantastic press conference that took place where it was the main event segment, and the press conference was Rich Swann and Kenny Omega and AEW. Tony Khan was part of the press conference, and Impact officials were part of the press. It looked like they were, it was a big deal. We're having this title unification match. They had wrestling journalists asking questions, and they were, Tony, this is wrestling. Can you assure us that this isn't some sort of like schmoz that's coming up here where you convoluted? Like, is it really going to be one man walking? No, we guarantee you that one man is going to walk away with both belts. They were treating it like this is a big unification match. Rich Swann has not yet made an appearance on Dynamite, and that bothers me. It just bothers me. And mention it. Act like Kenny Omega's title's in jeopardy. Impact is treating it like this is a huge deal. We all know Omega's going to win, which is the right call. It's fine. But show some parity. Let Rich Swann come on and have a match on Dark, for goodness sake, at least, and a victory over somebody. And make him seem like a threat to your champion, or that it's going to mean something when your champion shows up with another company's belt. I'm now wondering whether or not if it wins, if they'll even show the Impact title. That's how little AEW has paid attention to what, in my mind, should be the hottest angle in wrestling right now, and they're not treating it as such. So that bothers me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I Impact does need a little bit of love in all this, other than having AEW talent show up. Let's get some people across into Jacksonville, and I would love to see Swann come in and just destroy some people. Maybe bring some boys with him, and take out the super elite or whatever they are right now. I mean, I love all these guys as heels, and I think they work great as heels, but again, follow-up's the key, man, and it doesn't sound like we're getting much follow-up from no, this would be cool.
David Poole, I've actually thought about that. Like, what if this is a swerve and there's some, I can't see it happening, but you talk about people being shocked if AEW fans who don't even know that this match is happening find out that Kenny Omega is no longer their champion and Rich Swann just walks out on Dynamite one day with belt. That could be a cool way to salvage this, but I don't see it happening. But I agree that that's a fun fantasy booking. They got one more shot, Doug. I may be too little too late in my mind, but if they were to do something to promote the fact that this match is happening on the 25th of April, they have just this Wednesday night to do it. I hope they do. I will say right now, if they do, you're maybe looking at my performance of the week just because it's needed to happen.
Sounds good.
Well, brother, that is the Two Bros Wrestling Show, and that is the hits, misses, and picking up some of the things that go beyond just who wins on WrestleMania week. There's a lot to WrestleMania week, and lots of winners and losers in other companies, behind the scenes, who gets booked, who doesn't, how they're booked. And we thought this was a great chance to deeper dive into that. And we're going to do a deeper dive next week too, Doug. For those that join us at 8 o'clock next Sunday, we mentioned at the top of this show that there has been a lot of shuffling going on in the world of professional wrestling when it comes to the announce teams. And that made us think that there's a good show here waiting to happen. We're going to talk next week about the art of professional wrestling announcing. This is not like a baseball, football situation where all you need to do is call the action on the field. There's an art and a storytelling behind professional wrestling announcing. We're going to look at the history of announcing, who does it well, what makes a good announcer, some of our absolute favorites of all time. I'm going to put you on the spot, Doug. Next week, I want to talk to you about what your favorite announcer is of all time. And then we'll look at some of these changes that we've seen in this past week and kind of grade what we think of the individuals and how they're doing in their new roles.
Sounds good. So until then, I'm Doug.
See you next week, everybody.
See you next week.